When I started my training in Pretoria, South Africa in '89, I remember the first time I met an oral surgeon, and it was like, wow, this is a real-life oral surgeon. Because in those days, clinicians, technicians, and surgeons didn't work together closely. We did our little thing, they did their thing, and we all tried to put it together. Unfortunately, what I noticed in my career was the clinician, the restorative clinician, is always the one facing the patient, and he or she is the one holding the bag. She's the one having to explain why this doesn't look like teeth. So I went on Google and I found a few quotes. I like to use quotes when I start these presentations. The one quote that came up was, those who cannot do it, speak about it. So I said, well, that's definitely not going to work in today's presentation. So I found one about a team. And a team is a collection of individuals guided by a common purpose, striving for the same results. I think we're all striving for the same results. And once we can put these puzzle pieces together as a team, I think the results are so much better. Each member makes a unique contribution. Therefore, a team represents a powerhouse of potential. And that's what I've seen in our practice, how we can achieve brilliance when we work as a team together. Now, why a team approach? I believe coming to these conferences, by definition, every single one of you sitting here are striving for excellence. We learn from great clinicians like I'm sharing the stage with today, and I was impressed with some of the work they showed. So we're not here just to be average. You know, we could be playing golf today or spending a day at the spa and have Mr. Van Dyke pay for it. But we're here to learn, and by that definition, I know that you want to be exceptional. So a big part of this team, I think, is also the Nobel representative. Nobel is an exceptional company. I always enjoy speaking for Nobel because the company has such a good positive energy, great products, awesome research. I have the best team of representatives in North Carolina. But I don't think the representatives are always utilized by the team. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Then obviously qualified laboratory technicians. It's kind of important to have somebody that can make something look like a tooth. And it's always so eye-opening to me when I get technicians who come in for bench tests and they can't seem to make something look like a tooth. That's what we do. And then restorative clinicians willing to learn and implement these great technologies, and surgeons who understands the prosthetic part, the back end, what we're dealing with as the restorative team. So creating excellence through technology, I believe, is where we are today. One of the previous speakers mentioned how far we've come in such a short period of time. I've been doing this for 25 years. I remember doing my first Brandemark implant restoration and how much we struggled just to make or get the true emergence of a tooth, and how far we've come with CAD technology. So I want to present the perfect patient. This is one of those patients that got a restoration from one of our local clinicians, cut him a check for $30,000 and slap on the back and said, "You look great." Unfortunately for us nowadays, there's Google. And patients Google. This patient went online and she Googled if this was a good result. Restoratively for $30,000, I think she could have expected a little bit better. You can see, I think everybody had a little hand to play in this. Midline was off, technician didn't do that great, and our surgeon had some issues that morning. Seeing that I am here on Nobel's ticket, I will point out that the good part of this case was Nobel implants were used, and as we know, they never fail. And what we did as a team, we backtracked a little bit. This patient did some research and said, "I don't ever want zirconia in my mouth again." Because one of her friends looked at her and said, "Good gracious, you look worse now than you did with your dentures." What we did is we backtracked. We went with CAD abutments, and we did a layered PFM prosthesis, cementable. Now, I will say that I've seen in our industry in the last, especially 10 years, that our market shifted so far away from PFM that I think a lot of clinicians sometimes forget it's still a good, feasible option. If you look at the aesthetics we can achieve with layered porcelain, it's still something we can use and utilize in a lot of cases. So the 5-arm approach to excellence to me is a surgeon, surgically talented, very, very important, but somebody with a keen interest in learning what's available, learning the technologies, learning all on 4 principles, learning the difference, what we need as a restorative team from a surgical perspective. And then clinicians interested in finding different ways to treat their patients. If you think about 10 years ago, the fully edentulous patient, we had almost no options. You look at what we have today and how we can treat these patients and change their lives. And then lab technicians, technically talented, artistic and knowledgeable. I see myself, and I hope they see me like this too, as my surgeon's greatest ally. I help them train the clinicians, and the clinicians are the people that refer the patients back to the surgeon. So we make a team. One of our best teams is a prosthodontist in town, one of our Nobel's great oral surgeons, Dr. Uday Ribai, and myself. But we also have good rep support. The rep, for me, is a liaison between the team. I don't want reps to walk in and count my consignment. I don't want representatives to walk in and bring us bagels. I want them to drive business my way, and so does my oral surgeons. And if these representatives act and treat as liaisons, the team works so much better. It's obviously important to have well-researched products. A great company like Nobel, it's always a pleasure to see the new innovations they come up with, good research behind it, and that helps us to create excellence. Now, what I decided to do is, I like measurables. So I got a little scale to excellence, and every presentation has that point. If you don't get participation from the audience, the whole thing collapses. So if just one person can help me with this, that would be great. This is a surgeon friend of mine who had a pretty bad morning one day, and I'm going to scale this on check and cross. So if anybody want to take a chance, we're going to give him a cross or a check on this. Anybody? We're going to give him a cross. Now, I will say, I do have the clicker in my hand, but if somebody said a check, I did not have the ability to change that cross. So thank you very much for not letting this fail. So let me do one. This is a case we did about 6 months ago. And I'll see you how show you how I grade. I gave the surgeon, the clinician, the representative, and the technology a 0. But I gave the technician a check mark. And why is that? Because I have the clicker and I have the power to do that. So until they cut the mic off, I had nothing to do with this result. But we go back to our patient. You can see when we zoom in a little bit, there was almost nothing right with this case. And I learned with this patient that we're not treating teeth, we're treating people. She looked at me and said, "Can you help me?" Fortunately, I knew she came back to a great prosthodontist, and we had our surgeon help us to remove the implant on number 8. And so all the things went wrong originally. Clinician, technician, representative. The only thing we had in our favor in this case was the technology. We knew we had solid implants. So our team approach, we started with the basics. We took a shade of D2 and not 1M1. We also went back, removed the implant, and then set up a denture, a normal denture setup, and got this patient to a point where she approved in her mind what she saw as aesthetic. Not what we thought as a team, but what she thought. We then went back in, we casted a frame, we did some Nobel Procera abutments, and we went back and delivered a truly exceptional case. Now, this allows us to treat patients. It doesn't help us if we don't have a team approach to get to that point. So a lack of collaboration is a potential disaster. Let me tell you, I put potential in parentheses because I know that sometimes there are a lot of clinicians who don't like to work under these collaborative ideas or with these collaborative ideas. And we do sometimes get great results. But if you look at predictability, the more or the closer you as a team or your team works together, the better the results seem to be. So because I do a lot of these fixed hybrid cases, I've become known in North Carolina as the go-to guy for this type of disaster. Unfortunately, at this stage, we're backtracking. We're trying to fix what went wrong. And what I noticed is there's always finger pointing. At this stage, the finger pointing starts. It's the surgeon. The surgeon put number 6 too far facial. He didn't correct for angulation. So there is definitely some blame. There's also the restorative clinician. When the restorative clinician took the impressions, He didn't notice that we had angulation issues, and we're going to have access issues through our denture when we do our final. This patient was promised a fixed hybrid. And once they know they're going to have fixed teeth, it's very hard to backtrack and now say, we're going to put you in a removable clip denture. Then obviously the technician had nothing to do with this because we as technicians never do anything wrong. Now, as I animated this slide, I thought, I'm probably going to be the only one of one or two technicians in this whole room, and I might get beaten up. So I'm going to change that and say that the technician had just as much fault here. By processing a case without informing the team, we've got a problem. So by the time this patient showed back up at the restorative clinician, and he wanted to put this in the patient's mouth, the patient obviously asked, how are we going to deal with these access holes? So a technician is very valuable in stopping these type of issues from happening chairside. We could backtrack at this stage and still come up with a better solution before the patient is in the chair. And then our implant representative in this case was not the liaison to the team. I don't think our oral surgeon, our clinician, or our technician in this case had enough knowledge to either stay out of trouble or get out of trouble. And this is when I became or got involved with the case. So what is our options? Because we're working with Nobel, we have a multitude of very, very solid restorative options. We can still do a fixed hybrid, but we're going to sleep implant on number 6, and we will have to place multi-unit abutments. The problem at this stage is we're almost 6 weeks into the restorative process. This patient is getting ready to get their final teeth delivered, and now we're starting all over. As soon as we put multi-unit abutments on those implants, we have to take new bites, new setups, and start over. So it's a reasonable way to get out of trouble, but not ideal. The second way we have is a cementable. And this, personally, for me as a technician, as a ceramist, is the best way to restore fixed hybrids. When you go to these conferences, it's very rarely that you would see somebody show a denture and say, I do the best denture in the world, because the teeth are pretty much pre-made and then put in. There is definitely some art in denture work. But if you look at the nuances that we can create in ceramics, that's definitely the type of restoration that I enjoy. Our other option would also be a screw-retained Nobel Procera layered zirconia case. We've had exceptional results with these, and as you can see, aesthetically, these cases are definitely the way to go. Well, we ended up with this. We used all the implants. We cut a Nobel Procera titanium clip bar, and we did a semi-detachable denture. The patient wasn't very happy because she was originally promised fixed teeth. So if we can find a way to stay out of trouble, I think it helps the restorative process. Mr. Van Dijk also asked me to speak a little bit on Smart Fusion. Now, Smart Fusion allows us to use Nobel Clinician and superimpose a diagnostic wax-up and model on top of this. I'm going to try to explain to you why Smart Fusion is such a great idea when we do the planning originally and stay out of trouble. So a patient goes to our surgeon, a normal CT scan. At that stage, the surgeon or the restorative clinician sends us a PVS impression. It has to be a very accurate impression, so it cannot be an impression from Alginet. What we do is a true diagnostic wax-up at this stage. At this stage, what we do is digitize our wax-up and our model and create separate files. So now we have our CT scan that was done in the surgical office or in our surgeon's office, and we have 2 more data files, one just showing the model and one showing the model with the true diagnostic wax-up on it. What we do now is with Smart Fusion, we integrate these files into one unit. Now we can do our planning based off a true diagnostic wax-up. And excuse me for repeating myself a few times during the slide, because I think it's very important that you understand the technology and see how helpful it is in restoring these especially aesthetically driven cases. So we've got our CT scan with our Nobel Clinician design files, already designed our implants, and we have our surface data files. Our surface data files will be our model and it'll be our wax up. Smart Fusion now integrates these files and superimposes our model onto our CT scan. It actually uses the teeth to position itself in exactly the same position as we did the wax up. What we do from this point is order our surgical guide from Nobel Procera based off our design. Now we can do a multitude of things. We can do preoperative temporaries, but one thing we are guaranteed of is that our implants are going to go in exactly where we need them. And we have our surgeon, our clinician, our dental technician all on the same side of the field. Now, the advantages of this is images are not embedded. So when you look at your design, we're basically designing on a file that we can either make more radio opaque or more translucent, so we can look through the tooth. And remember, this is not a flared up barium sulfate scan. This is a true superimposed scan. No more barium sulfate flare-ups. We don't have to worry about scanning diagnosing. Actual position of the tooth is captured. Adjustable wax up for transparency, and we have a tooth down design. So instead of designing our implant and then trying to put our tooth on top, we look at where our tooth is and then put our implant in relationship to that. No expensive radiographic guides needed anymore, and our workflow is so much easier. We have 2 surgical guides available, depth and direction only. Now, once we have the direction, we can be certain that we can put our teeth where we want them to be. So vastly improved workflow, and I think this is what separates this system from what we used to have. Instead of our patient now going to the surgeon takes a scan, evaluates the patient to make sure they are a good candidate for implant placement, then sending the patient back to the restorative, take an impression, send it to the lab, we make a barium sulfate stent like we used to, and then send the patient and the stent back to the surgeon. Once the patient is scanned by the surgeon, it basically means that everything is where we need it. We get a scan, the lab performs a diagnostic wax-up, digitize the scan and our diagnostic wax-up. Smart Fusion integrates these files together. We design it, we get our stent, we do our guided surgery, and we go to our final. So this helps us to establish a good base to work from. I want to show you how sometimes the small details is what gets us in trouble. And I think a lot of the presentations you saw this morning showed this exact same thing. This is a case we did with guided surgery. Everything went great. Our surgeon did a great job. We nailed the shade, 95% right. But if you look at what we got, our gingival contouring was off by about a half a millimeter, maybe a millimeter on number 8. And if we could control that gingival contour, we would have ended up with a much more aesthetic result. Would a lot of patients notice this? Probably not. But as we are here, we're trying to reach for excellence. And let me show you how we get to that point. So immediate temporization, I'm very glad to hear, is a subject that came up quite a few times this morning. With the Nobel Active implant being so aggressive, we do immediate temporization on 9 out of 10 cases, if not more. My lab currently assists some of our surgeons in the area with about 25 to 30 immediate temps a week. So it's not something we don't do often. We do it literally every day. The success rate on these are amazing. So what we do is create an immediate temp that matches or copies the original CEJ of the tooth that we extracted. I started working with Dr. Lyndon Cooper at UNC Chapel Hill in '99 when we had only stock abutments. And the first thing he taught me was always look at the subgingival aspect of your abutments. We've paid so much attention of milling the abutment and getting the marginal contour right. Always forgot or never knew how important it was to get the subgingival right. So if you look at that, I leave the interproximals open, make sure we get as much tissue to come back in. You'll see there's a little bit of blanching around this temp to put a little pressure on the mid-gingival and see if we can create some contouring back into the interproximals. What I try to do, and this is what we learned from Tan now many, many years ago, was leave the contact point in the incisal third. So really leave those interproximals open. Sometimes we sacrifice a little bit of tooth form. We leave it shorter to make sure the patient cannot hit them in protrusive. I take the centric a millimeter out of occlusion, make sure there's no function on these. And then we leave those interproximals to allow our tissue to come back in. So if you look at this, this is a case we did with UNC Chapel Hill. Immediate temp number 7. That was the day of delivery. And 6 weeks later, you can see we had exceptional results, which means now we're ready to restore this case to excellence. So immediate temporization, especially the Nobel active implant, has allowed us to achieve that primary stability we need. So we can almost guarantee a patient, if we do immediate extraction, we almost all the time do immediate load with the system. So I animated this slide, and I'm thinking, now it's just becoming self-serving. I'm showing you all the great cases we did. But I realize it's much more than that. Now, what I see with these patients, especially in a case like this, think of a tooth like number 10 we did there. If we made a B1, we made a crown in there that was just too opacious, that patient would be in trouble for the rest of their lives because they wouldn't smile. So even though we do these awesome cases, it's so much more than just putting a crown in there. It's changing people's lives. We think of the big cases that make the difference. It's the small cases. And I want to encourage you to see that what we do is life-changing. Even single crown restorations is life-changing. I want to close with this case we did a while back, and this shows you that collaboration is such a powerful force if you use it correctly. This is one of our clinicians that's out of state, and that's normally very hard to work with a technician that's not close by. And I think one thing that all the speakers this morning will affirm is that they have very close relationships with their technicians and their oral surgeons, because that's how you create excellence. This is one of our clinicians down in Fayetteville. You look at this case, looks pretty straightforward. Our oral surgeon did a great job, placed the implants guided. But our clinician noticed that number 8's gingival contour is very low. Now you'll see I gave him a check there, not because he made beautiful temps, but because he noticed that if we change the gingival contour on number 8, we can actually create a case that's so much better. 6 weeks later, you can see how that tissue filled in. Unfortunately, when I made the temp, I undercontoured number 8 slightly too much, and we didn't get enough tissue pressure on number 8 to push that tissue back into the right gingival contour. Because we have digital pictures nowadays, we were actually able to match the shade based off digital photography alone. No custom staining needed. So it shows you if you get into these teams of technicians, surgeons that want to do things different, you can really achieve greatness. I want to close with this again. A team is a collection of individuals guided by a common purpose, striving for the same results. Each member makes a unique contribution, therefore a team represents a powerhouse of potential. Now we have so much technology available today. If you look at this case we did, it's a full upper rehab. There was no wax knife close to that case. There was no wax, there was no casting. So technology is there to help us. I know if you empower a team to work with you, you can achieve greatness. With that, I'd like to thank you.